what Kamala's been able to do, which we're seeing is brand new for this year, is re-energize the base. And you can see that in the numbers. In the first 24 hours that she was the nominee, she raised over $81 million, mostly from small donors, which is a record for one day. She just announced over $200 million raised in July. And these are just enthusiasm metrics that you can't fake.
David Montgomery first. Good afternoon to you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks very much for coming on the show. Just bring us up to speed on the latest state of the polls, the very latest, reflecting some of what we've seen this week at the Democratic Party convention.
Yes, thank you. We're still waiting for results to show what Americans think about the Democratic National Convention, whether Kamala Harris will get what's called a convention bump, which is something that we see in a lot of years where a politician's approval ratings tend to go up after the convention. So we'll see if that happens in the next week or so. Going into the convention, Harris in our polls from YouGov America had a slight edge. The most recent Economist YouGov poll, Harris had 46% to 43% for Trump. She's had similar leads of 2 to 3 points for the past several weeks, which is not a lot, but it is a big change from the situation before Joe Biden dropped out of the race, when Joe Biden was typically either trailing or tied with Donald Trump in these national polls, and also often facing rough results in some of the key swing states.
Well, you take the words right out of my mouth, because the key swing states are obviously where it matters. Tell us how she's doing there.
YouGov has worked with some of our partners to conduct polls in some of these key swing states. And my team mostly focuses on national polling, but in general, the polling we've done have found Harris either tied or ahead, depending on the swing states. So in general, she's in a good spot, but it's still a lot of time left. And we'll see what happens at the upcoming debate in September and the rest of the campaign in the final months before the election.
I mean, there was quite a lot of euphoria at the Democratic National Convention, wasn't there? And I wonder whether some of that is misplaced, given that it still remains on a knife edge, this election, doesn't it?
It is on a knife edge. It could go either way. The U.S. political system right now is very closely divided, and all our elections lately have been fairly close. Americans do tend to see right now that the Democratic Party as being a more united party than the Republican Party. Democrats are also, in our most recent poll, were more likely to say they're extremely enthusiastic about voting in the upcoming election. And this enthusiasm matters, as individual voters will have to make decisions about not just who they vote for, but whether they vote. And a party that's more excited, maybe more likely to turn out their base that can give them a crucial edge in a close election. But there is still a lot of time left.
Well, David, wait there if you wouldn't mind. I just want to bring in Patrick Frank now, who's a former campaign aide to Barack Obama and ex-outreach director at ActBlue, the main fundraising platform that supports left-leaning and democratic non-profits and politicians. Good afternoon, Patrick.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
We were just hearing there from David Montgomery, pollster, about the fact that, really Democrats can't afford to be complacent. It's good that they've got this enthusiasm from the convention, turning out the vote and so on. But it is still, she's got a very tough race ahead, hasn't she?
Yeah, I mean, as David said, every election over the past few cycles has been incredibly close. But what Kamala's been able to do, which we're seeing is brand new for this year, is re-energize the base. And you can see that in the numbers. In the first 24 hours that she was the nominee, she raised over $81 million, mostly from small donors, which is a record for one day. She just announced over $200 million raised in July. And these are just enthusiasm metrics that you can't fake, right? This is real people making real decisions. And one thing that's interesting is, it's not that Democrats started asking for these donations when Kamala became the nominee. The emails were going out for Joe Biden. They've been going out all year, but the response has been different. And I think when you're looking at, what is real, what is signal, and what is noise, you can't fake donations because they take real sacrifice from your supporters. And so, we'll have to see what this means for swing states, for swing voters. But certainly on the base level, it's impossible to deny objectively that Kamala Harris has energized the party in a way that we haven't seen in years, or maybe never at all.
So, what did we learn about Kamala Harris and her vice presidential pick this week?
I think what we learned this week is that they're capable of putting together a broad coalition of Democrats. We didn't see a divisive convention that a lot of people were worried about. There weren't a lot of distractions. And it was clear from the energy that you could see, if you were watching it on TV, I'm sure if you were in the room, the energy was real. The buzz is real. And, when you take those things which are sort of ethereal, and then you combine them with the hard numbers, the polling that David's seeing, and the fundraising numbers, the explosion of volunteer activity that the campaign has been reporting. What you see is a full picture of the Democratic Party putting together its coalition and running with a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. And I think it's too soon to say what this will look like in November. But today, the Democratic Party looks very strong.
Okay, and would you advise her to stay optimistic? Because there's definitely been a very optimistic strain to this week's messaging. Or do you think this inevitably will get pretty nasty? And Donald Trump, you heard in that call to Fox News, he's determined to fight dirty, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump has his way of doing things. And I think not just Americans, but the whole world. I think you can ask most people on Earth, what is Donald Trump? What is he like? What does he do? Does he tell the truth? Is he nice? And you're going to get pretty much the same answers. You call it optimism. What I would say is that there's the optimistic buzz you're feeling is from the party supporters and the party in general, feeling very confident about their message, their candidate, and their process. But I wouldn't say it's purely a message of optimism. Kamala talked a lot about the risks of Donald Trump being elected again. I don't think Democrats are taking their eyes off the ball in terms of talking about the risk that Republicans and Donald Trump pose to democracy and to the world. But at the same time, clearly they're campaigning with joy, and I think that you can't fake something like that. Again, to go back to those sort of objective numbers. You've got millions of Americans, filling in their credit card details to give $5 because they want to be part of something. And when you see those things happening, it's hard not to feel optimistic that at least we're putting our best foot forward.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? The number of small donors, as you say, not just reliant on the really big, rich donations. But one final thought from you. I just want to return to David Montgomery after that and get a sort of final take on the polls. But it was very celeb-y. It was very starry, the convention. People like Oprah Winfrey putting in there. But an endorsement from Taylor Swift wouldn't go amiss, would it, for the Democrats?
Well, as a minor Swiftie myself, I can only hope. I think that, Taylor Swift has always been clear that she has respect for women, for people of all shapes and sizes and colors and creeds. It's hard to say that she's probably not more on the left than the right. I know she's endorsed in the past Democrats in Tennessee. I would love to be able to break news on something like that. I unfortunately am not in Taylor Swift's circle of trust, but I promise I will make another small donation the day that she endorses.
Well, Patrick Frank, thank you very much for joining us. Just a final word from David Montgomery, pollster from YouGov UK, who I know has been listening into that. Aside from YouGov US, I should say, rather than YouGov UK, aside from any endorsement from Taylor Swift or Beyonce or anyone else, what will be the impact of Robert Kennedy Jr. pulling out of the presidential race as we expect this evening? Will that help Trump most, do you think, David?
Well, first I can say we do actually have some numbers on potential Taylor Swift endorsement. YouGov recently polled that, asking what people thought a Taylor Swift endorsement would be good or bad for various candidates. 53% of Americans think it would be positive for Kamala Harris if she got a Taylor Swift endorsement, including 80% of Democrats think that. As far as Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he has been falling in the polls lately. One of the interesting things about Harris's rise from where Biden was in early July is that Donald Trump hasn't gone down in the polls. Trump is sort of holding on to his support overall, It's just that Harris has gone up. She's taken in a lot of disaffected Democrats and Democratic-leaning voters who had been saying they were going to vote for a third-party candidate, or that they were going to maybe not vote, or weren't sure what they were going to vote. And a lot of those Democrats have now come home, which means that a lot of the people who are still supporting Robert F. Kennedy are not Democrats. The numbers are hard to say because there's relatively few people supporting Kennedy right now. So you can get into some sample size issues and some very large margins of error. But some of our recent polls have suggested that a majority of current Kennedy supporters say they would prefer Trump over Harris.
Right. David Montgomery, thank you very much for joining us.